What's up, everyone, and welcome to March 2020, and welcome to another edition of In Focus. My name is Grayson Singleton. Thank you so much, as always, for listening on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you might be finding our show today. Coming up on our jam-packed show, we are going to talk about the National Anthem in a way that doesn't involve kneeling for once. So you might want to stick around for that, because that has ties to my home state of Texas. We're also going to discuss J.J. Watt, as he has a new team after his release with the Houston Texans last month. All that and more coming up, but first, let's start with another installment of What the Heck Happened Last Week. And we start with the NCAA, and the association has levied penalties on the University of South Carolina. These penalties stem from an investigation involving recruiting violations by now assistant coach Lamont Evans. Evans was an assistant coach also at the Oklahoma State University here in Stillwater a few years back, which is why Oklahoma State currently has a postseason ban on it, stemming from the exact same thing. Now, a couple of reasons why this can work in favor of the OSU men's basketball team as they look to continue to appeal the ban that was levied over the summer. And number one, the NCAA placed South Carolina on probation, not a postseason ban. Now, obviously, this won't matter because South Carolina isn't good this year. Well, I take that back. They are. But why would the NCAA give probation to one school, but a postseason ban to another? So if the appeal of Oklahoma State is heard before Selection Sunday, which is in a couple of weeks, Oklahoma State could use that to their advantage. Number two, why this can also work in favor of the Cowboys. Because Lamont Evans was an assistant coach long before anybody involved with this team was around. He was not on Mike Boynton Jr.'s staff, and all players that were involved in such recruiting violations are not on the team today. So, in essence, you would be punishing a coaching staff and players for something that their predecessors did, which doesn't seem very fair, but whenever has the NCAA ever been fair or made sense in general? So, enough of the NCAA. To the NFL, where there's trouble in Seattle. Russell Wilson might want out and is very disgruntled with the team, largely because they have not been able to put together another Super Bowl caliber team ever since those two Super Bowls that they went to in 2014 and 2015, winning one. Russell Wilson has been one of the most under pressure quarterbacks in the last 5 years and has been sacked almost more than any other quarterback, including Deshaun Watson, who the troubles of him in Houston just continue to spiral out of control. Now, Russell Wilson has not formally demanded a trade, and neither has his agent. However, this gets tricky because Russell Wilson, in the event that he is traded, has a list of 4 teams that he would elect to go to. And this list is profound because Russell Wilson, like Deshaun Watson and many other quarterbacks these days, has a no-trade clause in his contract. So those 4 teams are the Saints, Cowboys, Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chicago Bears, of whom he would agree to be traded to. Now, it may not be that Russell Wilson is gone by this offseason, but according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, it seems likely that the Seahawks and Russell Wilson will part ways at some point in the near future, be it either this offseason, which I don't think is likely, next offseason, or the offseason after. Basically, what Schefter has reported is that Russell Wilson will not be finishing his career with the Seattle Seahawks, and those two are destined to part ways at some point. Sticking with the NFL and sticking with the NFC West, the Arizona Cardinals are continuing to build their team under young quarterback Kyler Murray and under young head coach Cliff Kingsbury. The team signed J.J. Watt about an hour before I went on air to record this show to a 2-year, $31 million deal. So first of all, my first question with this is, why is J.J. Watt getting so much money? That's $15.5 million per year for an aging pass rusher who has not been a Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher in about 2 or 3 years. Now, J.J. Watt is still very good, but I happen to wonder that this cap number for an aging, injury-prone pass rusher might hamper the team in one way or another. However, the return could be astronomical, pairing him with Chandler Jones on one side of the offensive line, on one side of the defensive line, with Marcus Golden on the other side, could be a very lethal pass rushing trio there. Not to mention Hassan Reddick, who who broke out as a Pro Bowler this season from his linebacker position. So everything is working for the Cardinals to improve their defense if J.J. Watt is healthy and can return to some semblance of his Pro Bowl years from the early 2010s. But if not, the Cardinals could have put themselves in a salary cap purgatory, preventing them from improving their team to compete in a very good NFC West. All right, that's it for what the heck happened last week. A busy week in sports, and we didn't even cover what has happened with the Lakers or the situation that nearly involved the death of Tiger Woods. But enough of that. Let's move on to our main story today. The United States National Anthem is back in the news. And by the way, is there ever another country on planet Earth that we talk about their anthem so much? Controversy arose when it was discovered that the Dallas Mavericks were not playing the national anthem for the first 13 home games of this regular season. It is worth noting that these games did not have fans, as the Mavericks elected to start their season without allowing fans at the American Airlines Center, but have since allowed a limited number of spectators. And for the record, I have no problem with the Mavericks deciding not to play the national anthem, particularly because in an empty arena, it serves no purpose whatsoever. And you're going to see why I have no problem with this in the coming minutes. But for this segment, I want to investigate a few things. Number one, why do we play the national anthem before every single sporting event? I actually have a genuine inquisition about that. Number two, why Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks stopped playing it in the first place. And number three, what does this sort of backlash and this sort of conversation say about our culture here in the United States of America in 2021? So buckle up. This is going to be a very interesting discussion. And let's start with this. Why do we play the national anthem before every single sporting event? It's cool to play the anthem before major events. Maybe like an NBA Finals, the final of a US Open, the Super Bowl, which not only is the biggest football event and the biggest sporting event in America, but it's also one of the biggest festivals of our country's culture. So playing the national anthem before events like that, particularly the Super Bowl, is appropriate. But for every single game? Like, think about it. Not every Dallas Mavericks game is seen by a large viewing audience due to how the NBA structures its television deals. Not every Mavericks game is nationally televised on ESPN, TNT, or wherever the NBA nationally televises its games. As a matter of fact, not even most of Texas sees Dallas Mavericks games. But for some reason in our American culture, we have decided that we need to play the anthem before every single game. We play it before every college game. We play it before most high school games. And this goes back to a personal story here, because not only was this played in most of our away games when I was in high school playing varsity basketball, it wasn't like we were playing high-profile high schools either. Now, some of them we were. We were playing high-level TAP 6A high schools like Prestonwood Christian, John Paul Academy, and what have you. And if you're from Texas, you're very familiar with those schools. If you're not from Texas, those are high-profile private schools in the Texas area and are largely competing in many sports for state championships. But before every game at those sorts of schools, the national anthem was played. And I started to wonder why back in around my junior and senior year. And I came up with this question: what do we go to sporting events for? And the large unanimous answer would be to see the athletes play. So if we're going to sporting events because of the athletes, what do the athletes have to do with the anthem? Do the athletes even pay attention to the anthem? They might. From personal experience, I don't. Because while as a spectator of the anthem, you might be thinking about the country or anything like that, for me, the anthem was one of two things. It was either a last second way to settle down and go over the game plan once, or number two, and a little bit more condescendingly, it was just a 90 to 140 second drag between when warm-ups ended and we can actually go play basketball. So And that opinion might be shared with a bunch of other players. That opinion might not be shared with a bunch of players. This is just my own personal experience, and I have talked to a few people, and they have thought the same way. And I'm pretty sure there's others that think differently and actually enjoy having the anthem settle them down before the game starts. There's a wide variety of opinions. I get that. But it's come to the point where, and I've noticed this attending games at Boone Pickens Stadium and at Gallagher-Iba Arena here at Oklahoma State, the players aren't even around for the national anthem. It's after the anthem that they make their appearance onto the football field before the game finally starts. The only games since I've been here at Oklahoma State that the players are around for are the baseball games. And because having the baseball players go off the field and back into the clubhouse and then return to the dugout and then back onto the field would just be awkward. So you understand why they're around for the anthem. But in terms of basketball and football, the players they're absent. So if we're going to the games to see the players and the players are not present for the ceremony, why are we still doing this before every game? Now, again, just for purposes of me not being called anti-American or anything, I do not have a problem with playing the national anthem before main events. But it's interesting how we play it before every little thing, and that's the crux of this conversation, really. Also, it's also worth noting that America is the only country that actually does this, because in most professional leagues, it is in their mandate to play the anthem before every game. This is in Major League Baseball. This was made apparent by NBA Commissioner Adam Silver after the Mavericks controversy. It's definitely a thing in the NFL where players are not required to, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were eventually required to stand for the anthem. And it's standard in Major League Soccer, around the NCAA, and everything in America. This does not happen in many other countries. This does not happen in Mexico. This definitely does not happen in Europe, where we focus on a lot of overseas sports being in Europe. Those countries like England, or the United Kingdom rather, France, Spain, Germany, they don't play their anthems before every single game. And I particularly focused on soccer matches because that's the big thing in Europe. So, and in my research for this, I found an interesting article in Business Insider. And the author of this article was in Canada. He was at a Toronto Blue Jays game. It was his first game outside of the United States. And this is weird that it's in Canada because the U.S. has seemed to move its odd sense of patriotism, which I'll cover in a minute, and enforce it upon other countries. So, I'll quote this article directly. Quote, "Upon hearing the opening notes of the Star-Spangled Banner, we froze in our tracks, removed our hats, and gazed solemnly at the field. The beer vendor looked at us with a puzzled bemusement, asking, 'What are you doing?' He responded, 'Well, in our country, if you don't stop what you're doing and take off your cap for the national anthem, they shame you,' which is a thing here in this country. The beer vendor replied, 'Well, you're not in your country.' She Canadian-splained us. He goes on to say that Canadians don't love their country any less than Americans. On the contrary, they will not shut up about how much more polite they are, how much cleaner their cities are, and how much better their overall quality of life is. Still, that national anthem moment in Toronto was an instructive one.'" And he goes on to explain the purpose of his article. "It reinforced my belief in America that the playing of the national anthem isn't a moment of prayer and reflection for those lost in war or a communal expression of gratitude for all that makes America great. It is the pregame anthem. It is a mass display of ritualized obedience." So why are we doing this? And I happen to agree with that opinion. It is a mass ritual of ritualized obedience, which, if you think about the core values of America when America was founded, does this not seem complete opposite? Like the complete antithesis of what America is supposed to be? Ritualized obedience is not something that's supposed to be a part of this country. But in the ceremony that's supposed to honor it, we're doing the exact opposite. So just a thought there. Just a thought for you to keep in mind. So let's go on to the second question in this investigation of this anthem controversy involving the Dallas Mavericks. And my second big question is, why did Cuban stop playing the national anthem? And why did he elect to see how long it would go until somebody noticed it and subsequently made backlash for it? And this is what Mark Cuban said. So he was on ESPN's The Jump with Rachel Nichols, who is a fantastic ESPN reporter for a fantastic show. And his response to why the anthem wasn't being played was this, quote, "In listening to the community, there were quite a few people who voiced their concerns, really their fears, that the national anthem did not fully represent them and that their voices were not being heard. We didn't make any decision to never play the national anthem then. We didn't cancel the national anthem. We still had our flag flying proud up on the wall at American Airlines Center, which it is, and everybody had the opportunity to address it and pray to it or salute to it or whatever their feelings are," end quote. And this seems like a decent reason to stop doing something, right? A large portion of a community that is mostly representative of a basketball team, number one. It's a little different with the Mavericks, but for the most part. He felt like the anthem was not representative of everybody. So he decided to stop playing it. Now, this may not be a great reason to stop doing something that actually might have significance, but it certainly is a more than decent reason to stop doing something that's unnecessary and, quite frankly, weird. When you look at the general scope of the world and how countries display their patriotism, the United States has a very weird way of doing it, and I use the word weird for two reasons. Number one, we could use the word unique because it is unique how much we hear our national anthem, but unique has a connotation of you're different for this glorious, beautiful, and good reason, and I don't want to display this uniqueness as if it was all positive. Similarly, if you wanted to use the word odd, that has the opposite connotation. It's a negative one. So I kind of used a rather neutral word of just weird, because it's weird compared to the rest of the world. The fact that we play the national anthem so much is, for lack of a more sophisticated term, it's just weird. It's like when your mom asks you, "Why don't you go play with the kid down the street?" Well, there's nothing particularly wrong with him, but I don't particularly like him that much. He's just weird. He or she. So this seems like a decent reason to stop doing something that's unnecessary. It's not really useful to the event in any way. So, which brings me to my third question. What does this say about American culture? And this is interesting because of the backlash that Mark Cuban got. Because word of this, eventually, as it would have, word of this got to the Texas state capitol, where Republican Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick urged Cuban in a tweet to, quote, "sell the franchise and some Texas patriots will buy it," end quote. He would go on to say later, not in a tweet, that, quote, "it is hard to believe that this could ever happen in Texas, but Mark Cuban's actions of yesterday made it clear that we must specify that in Texas we play the national anthem before all major events. In this time when so many things divide us, sports are one thing that bring us together, right, left, black, white, and brown," end quote. Okay, first of all, this is complete nonsense from the lieutenant governor. Number one, the national anthem is not something that unites us anymore. The national anthem is something that has been divisive for a long time. And we're coming off of a presidential era and a presidential administration that used the anthem, which became divisive with the events of police shootings among black Americans and the subsequent protests led by Colin Kaepernick. We're coming off of a president that used that to further divide us. So if there's anything about the anthem, it's not uniting at all. As a matter of fact, it does most of the opposite. And number two, Patrick said, Lieutenant Governor Patrick said that sports are one thing that brings us together. What does the anthem have to do with sports? Like, really, what does it have to do with sports? Because Europe has shown that we can do sports without the anthem. They don't play the anthem before every single game. But this only happens in America and then in American sporting events in Canada. The lieutenant governor also said that he intends to introduce a bill to the Texas Senate to ensure and basically have the Texas government mandate that the anthem is played. And the thing I would ask the lieutenant governor is, if you've heard the comments from Mark Cuban about why he decided not to play the anthem, because it feels like it doesn't represent everybody, why would you go introduce a law or a bill with hopes of it becoming a law? Why would you go introduce a law to mandate it? Yet you're trying to be unifying. Like, the contradiction here is so vast, and as a politician, how can you be so detached from society to do something like that? We're in a situation where racism is rearing its ugly head again. We've just coming off a racial justice movement and a social equality movement that has not gripped our country since the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and you're going to introduce something to undermine that? But yet you want to use the word unify and unite? Just a thought there, and of course I'm not here on this show to get political, but the original purpose of me doing this show is when sports intersects culture, and this is a perfect example of when sports intersects culture, and to a point where we have politicians again refusing to see why people are doing things that might be a little against the norm. Which leads me to my second point under this question of what does this say about American culture. This has become a love it or else country. Or this is my first point. What this says about American culture. Number one, this says that this has become a love it or else country, which is far from what anybody thought that this country was supposed to be back in the 1700s when it was founded. It's a love it or else country. Anytime somebody tries to do something that might just be a little bit off, there is intense backlash from everybody. And you're called being un-American. Ladies and gentlemen, the love it so change your country is what America was supposed to be. People like Colin Kaepernick, people like Mark Cuban, and what he did a couple weeks ago, or was brought out into the open a couple weeks ago. That should be celebrated because that's what was supposed to be America. We weren't supposed to be indoctrinating everybody into ritualized patriotism, which I'll get to patriotism in just a second. We weren't supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be exchanging ideas and trying to make this country better without fear of a monarchy or a government institution being a part of the backlash. But as you saw with the case with Lieutenant Governor Patrick, that's exactly what's happening. And with the former president, this is what's happening. And part of how, and I said this when I was a guest on the Ocala Student Sports section, 8 to 10 p.m. weeknights on Triple Play Sports Radio here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. A main reason why this happens a lot is because of how I've generally seen Americans raise their kids, is that we are indoctrinated with the Pledge of Allegiance. We say it everywhere. We're indoctrinated with the National Anthem. We hear it at every single sporting event. And we're taught that this is how it is. And if you dare change it, you're not American. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got news for you. That's the antithesis of what it means to be American. We have to remember that America was born out of a protest. Its entire essence is a protest taken to the most extreme level ever, a war. Number two, what else does this say about America? It says that patriotism, whatever patriotism means, is always king in every single debate that we have about changing something. Remember that quote I said from that article at Business Insider? The pregame anthem is a mass display of ritualized obedience, in quote, and I'll add on to that with a paraphrase in the form of under the name of patriotism. People say that if you do anything different, then you must not love your country. This was the header of the article that I didn't read, and I saved it for this particular time. This is what the author says: I love America, I support troops, and I want sports teams to stop playing the anthem before every game. It is not an act of genuine patriotism, it is a ritual of joyless conformity. And I share that sentiment. I really do. I love America. I consider myself fortunate to be here and to be born here. I support troops. I'm very thankful to them. But this idea of we have to play the national anthem before everything has to stop. Because there's no point. And we can't say that people like me who do shows and may have these opinions, or people that are actually in positions to act on them, like Mark Cuban is, are unpatriotic. Because it's not. And if patriotism means that we just follow every little indoctrination that we get since the time we're 5 years old, that does not make us patriots. Ladies and gentlemen, that makes us robots. That makes us American robots who will conform to this system of practices for the sake of our country. Like this is crazy. You can't say that people who decide to be human and use their intuition and sense of investigation and curiosity un-American. No, it just makes them human, not robotic. Number 3, what this says about America. We forget that reasons and causes matter. And that's the reason I read you the Mark Cuban quote as to why he didn't want to play the anthem, and he experimented with not playing the anthem. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you are somebody that attends sporting events, go to a sporting event, and maybe one day they don't play the national anthem, and see if you even notice. Like, see if that makes a difference to your experience. And if it does, then you might have to question why you're going. But we forget that reasons, causes, and motivations for certain things matter. And this is as blatant in American culture as the sky being blue. Because we forget, when we talk about, especially what happened last summer with the riots all over the country following the murder of George Floyd, and people willing to condemn them so quickly as, oh, it's violence, it's not good. Well, wait a minute, stop. Reasons for why these are happening matter. And I talked to a lot of people about this as a lot of people compared what happened in the summer to what happened at the Capitol in January. Those two are not the same thing at all. And a lot of people want to make them seem like they're the same thing, but causes and reasons matter. One is because somebody was murdered, the other is because somebody lost an election. Figure it out from there. The original anthem protests. Yes, it was a break from societal norm, and it was a change in the status quo. But it wasn't somebody who just sat and then eventually kneeled out of laziness. By now, we all should know the reason behind what Colin Kaepernick did. Causes matter. And Mark Cuban blatantly stated why he decided not to play the national anthem before the first 13 games of the Mavericks home season, because he felt like some communities were not represented. That is called a man with a social conscience that is trying to do some good for the country. Reasons matter. They really, really do. And it's sad that sometimes people have justifiable reason to riot and tear up cities, but pick up a history book and you can kind of see where that's coming from. And number 4, the fourth thing that this says about American culture. There's a lost sense of investigation. And this goes back to my second point with patriotism being king in everything here in America. Is that we get so used to the ceremonial this and the ceremonial that and the ritualized this of saying the pledge of the national anthem. I mean, the Pledge of Allegiance in school and singing the national anthem before every single sporting event. Is that we've lost a sense of questioning that is in humans. We are born with curiosity. And when people try to exercise that, there is so much vitriol that is thrown back that we are discouraging using a part of our brain that we were born with. So when it comes to issues like these, we don't use our sense of investigation, and anybody who does is accused of leftist indoctrination, whatever that means. And that's the goal of my show. Like, the goal of my show here is, and I'll tell you this, I use a totally different part of my brain when preparing for this show than I do preparing for my other show, Spinning Sports Podcast, with my friend Landon Bethea. I use a totally different side of my brain because the goal of this show isn't just to talk about sports. It's not the goal of my show to be agreeable or to spark debates over whether Luka Doncic or Damian Lillard should have been an all-star starter, which, by the way, check out our last episode, and that was our main discussion. The goal of this show is for me to think and for everybody else to think. Now, if you come to the same conclusion I do, that's fantastic. But I don't expect a lot of people to agree with me, partly because of the region of the country that I'm in. But it's just for people to think, because that's not something we do anymore. We really don't. And this lost sense of investigation is critical. Like, we have to get this back. Because otherwise, once we start going on a slippery slope, if there's nobody there to stop it with creativity and with inquisition, then it's just going to keep going. So when it comes to this controversy, as we wrap this segment up, it says a lot about American culture. Patriotism is king, whatever that means. This has become a love it or else country, almost a love it or leave it country. We have forgotten that reasons and causes and motivations matter, and we've lost a sense of investigation. So, what could this Cuban story tell us? Number one, Mark Cuban, if you know anything about this man, loves his state of Texas and he loves America. And he is always going to try to do what's better for the country. That's number one. So he's a true patriot. Number two, he loves his country, but instead of loving it or else, or loving it or leaving it as it is, or loving it or leaving it, he's loving it and trying to change it, for which he should be commended, as should anybody else. Number three, he has justifiable reasons for halting something that is unnecessary and, like I explained earlier, weird. And number four, he's willing to question and go out of his way to make dialogue, which Mark Cuban is fantastic at. He has done this so much. So that's something we should take away from the story. And if you choose to implement one of these little nuggets in your life, fantastic. But at some point, if you choose to implement all four, I think we could make better individual Americans, and therefore a better country.